We'll now move on to the next plenary session. For the second plenary session, I request Professor Wesley Jayakumar to introduce the resource person, Dr. K. Shanthichitra, Associate Professor and Head, SRM Institute of Technology, Kataankulathur.
Good morning to all. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Well, respected convener, Dr. S. Bashir Ahmed, Principal and HOD, Department of English. Respected Professor S.A. Sheikh Mohammed, Vice Principal, Academics. Professor Syed Sharmat Ahmed, Head in Charge, Department of English. Dr. Professor Anwar Sadat, Director, IQAC. The Alpha Research Academy members, distinguished speakers, the participants from other great institutions, the organizing committee members. It gives me great honor to introduce Dr. K. Shanthichitra. Dr. K. Shanthichitra, novelist, short story writer, associate professor and HOD SRM Institute of Technology, Kataankulathur. When Dr. Sadik passed on her resume to me, it was, when I went through, it was really great. Dr. K. Shanthichitra, it goes like this. Next to her name, novelist, short story writer, and then a designation, associate professor and HOD and all that. That is the spirit of this great personality. If you and I were there, we would just mention our designation next to our name. But here, Dr. K. Shanthichitra, novelist, short story writer. That is the spirit of this great personality. I like that idea. I was, going through a couple of the profiles of great writers, like Wally Shoyinka. See, it is there, Wally Shoyinka is actually Professor Emeritus, but actually in his profile, I could read something similar to what Dr. K. Shanthichitra has recorded. Wally Shoyinka, dramatist, novelist, poet, and then Professor Emeritus. So that is the spirit of this great personality. Professionalism is not known in abstractness. This thought, there's something I read a couple of days ago. Professionalism is not known in abstractness, but in praxis. You are what you share, you are what you think, you are what you write. In short, you are what you practice. So professionalism is not known in, it doesn't lie in abstractness like your associateship, your assistant professorship, your professorship even. You are what you practice. The word praxis, we are right, it's a very important word when we come here to present papers. Praxis is something, associated with growthism. A string of achievements in a resume is something great. So I'm really happy, I'm really honored to introduce this great personality, the novelist, short story writer. And now let me focus on the novel she has written at such a young age. The first one, Fractals. The Fractals, published in 2016. The same novel was, again, published by Notion Press. When it was published by Notion press, the novel reached worldwide attention. The writer Rajati Salma finds the novel an exemplary contribution to feminism and gender studies. Oh, really great. And Dr. Shanthichitra has translated the same novel. The title goes like this: Kaliyuga Keriviyum Onai Kuttigal was a translation of the same novel, The Fractals. And the second novel has a wonderful title, Lovely Marriages, again published by Notion Press. And the third one, Intimate Strangers, again published by Notion Press. And the fourth one is, Madam has written a book, Fiction and Anita Nair, a study of structures of consciousness of women characters, published by Emerald Publications. Dr. Shanthichitra, she has participated and presented papers in 17 conferences, all UGC sponsored, 10 national and 7 international conferences. She has to her credit 43 research articles published in approved journals, 6 in Scopus journals, 12 publications in referred journals, 2 edited books, 3 novels, as I mentioned earlier, the 1 translation, translated 1, 2 short stories and 1 poem, chapters in 2 books. Her contribution to the academic fraternity is something great. She's been a Board of Studies member in Bishop Heber College and Meenakshi Academy of Higher Education. The list goes on and on. And she has delivered a lot of guest lectures in many great institutions. She has completed her BA, MA in Holy Cross College, Tiruchirappalli, MPhil and PhD in Bishop Heber College, Tiruchirappalli. And her resume also states that she's the best outgone student in all her degree courses. It's something great. The credit goes to the institutions she studied, Holy Cross College and Bishop Heber College. But I want to make a point here that only if the student is very passionate, no doubt she's a child prodigy. That is what her resume states. In 17 years, 2 months, with 17 years teaching experience, she has indeed achieved a lot. Incredible. Hats off to her, to this great personality. Indeed, she's a great personality. I wish her success in all her future endeavors. Okay, with this, I conclude now. Over to Dr. Shanthichitra. We welcome you, ma'am. We are really honored, particularly in person. I'm really happy to have you in the midst for this great session. Thank you, one and all. Please, your show starts, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Professor Wesley, sir, for that elaborate introduction. I personally love to introduce myself as a storyteller than anything else. And in today's conference also, I'll be presenting the whole paper only from that perspective. And first of all, I would like to record my best wishes and congratulations to the organizers of this conference on 21st century culture, literature, the cultural representations in 21st century. My special thanks to the management of New College, without whose support a conference of this magnitude is not possible. Thank you again. And to begin with, I have to relate a few observations of mine about this century. We are at the earliest part of the century. That is the first quarter we are at. And we are here trying to analyze the era to grasp the turnings and the destinations that this age is likely to arrive at the end of the century. According to me, it's quite early to come to any conclusion about what's new here. We are going to find out, because we would still be finding us much entangled in the past impacts and influences of the previous century. All the previous speakers were mostly concentrating upon that only. So mine will be going back to the same past century. And the reason is, for most of the writers of ours now are traveling from the past century. So to expect new thinking and trace the unique features of this era is quite difficult. Yet we are likely to trace a few possibilities, or rather, we can try and get a rough glimpse of what the century is likely to give us in future is possible. In fact, that way, this is a very good time to have a conference on this topic. Inshallah, I also hope the sequence of the same conference is conducted again after 20 years or so, and we analyze more about it then as well. Okay, only then I think we can really understand where we are at and where we are heading toward. In fact, these kind of documentation and deliberations have to take place constantly, with more concentration on the century's mindset, which, as Jung's collective unconscious talks about, where are we heading toward is something which must be, from time to time must be grasped all the time. And that way, this conference will help a lot. And so it's my request to the department as well, like, hopefully let us see that we have another one in 20 years' time as well. To know the kind of a culture that is depicted in 21st century literature, it would be more appropriate if we look around a little and check our world ourselves first. For me, we cannot forget that what we get in literature is the world around us. Some might debate that it is the other way around, but the essential part is that even if not immediately after everything that you get to see in literature, after a point of time, you would be able to see that your literature becomes a reality of the age. What I get to see right now in this age is a lot of gadgets, less human communication, and much lesser human sensibilities. Lots of identity assertions, loud noise of laughter, and intense desire to get connected to the world, but mostly lost in the virtual world, and the desperation to become popular overnight. Much lesser human sensibilities, I said, because in this pandemic time, in a neighboring nation of ours, in Myanmar, people are getting killed by their own military personals. In desperation, the representations are made about it in the international beauty pageants as well, but still somehow deaf ear is being paid. No solid intervention of any international governing bodies has been made yet. Young people are brutally being tortured. Mothers are falling at the feet of the military men and begging for forgiveness for nothing. At the end, only proving that irrespective of which century you are in, your ideology of power and lust to exert your power on the other is still continuing unscathed, unharmed. Amitav Ghosh, in his The Glass Palace, written in the last year of the 20th century, has already spoken about the greed of people who for a century now, for almost 3 generations now, are plundering the once known as the golden land on this earth, that is Burma back then. The people of Myanmar could never live in peace. From colonization to till date civil war, the unrest that is being caused the inhuman activities that the country's own military indulges into, remains as a fact that a solution to human hatred is still going to be a search in this century as well. Amitav Ghosh, in his The Glass Palace, written in the last century of the 20th century, has already spoken about this, and this is what we find here. All these might make one wonder what kind of a world that it would be at the end of the century. If it is going to be the shallow one, a brutal one, a numb one, a complacent one, but the point is, every age has always seemed and sounded only like this to every writer, and that's why we have even started writing. We would always feel that the earlier age was better and the contemporary one is not enough. And the writers start striving to make sense out of the past and give a fresh new experience to the present, and does everything to keep the people not to lose their sensibilities, which so uniquely and beautifully makes them to claim a place in the progression, in civilization in particular. And what a writer does through his experience, which he has collected both through reading and living, the present, the past, the tradition, the culture, now all mixed together, he develops himself an ink with which he starts writing. Now, this is what we are trying to analyze. What are the ingredients this ink is made of for a writer who's going to write in the 21st century? And this is what we are analyzing here as well. Now, we have to understand that 21st century writer have his or her roots spread till the first half of the 20th century, at least. How we are, in spite of all the modern equipment, hold the same thoughts and tendencies of the past era is the point which will be majorly proven here. New, according to me, is rare for now, except in the level of insistence of accommodative tendencies, particularly toward LGBT and individualistic feminism, now which is also known as I-feminism. So the intensity of the level of insistence can be seen multiplying in comparison to the past century. This we might come across in the 21st century a lot. All endeavors at every level will be made to get the acceptance from the society to allow LGBT community to have a secure place in the society. And the certification of the status as an accepted lifestyle is likely toward the end of the 21st century. Now, these are the observations. Individualist feminism, which is it's a tradition that stresses individualism, personal autonomy, choice, consent, freedom, and state-sanctioned discrimination on the basis of sex or gender, the equality under the law. Now, these are the things which they insist upon. Basically, total non-conformism, taking all responsibility for every act. That is one beautiful thing about it. Taking complete responsibility for every act and not merely blaming others for her situation or state is something which belongs to individualistic feminism. But still, since it comes from the radical and liberal point of view, there are many questions which is raised against it. But if you closely look at I-feminism, we will understand that this is also something which comes from the past, where a woman accepted her role as hers and she wasn't blaming any, but there was a certain amount of ignorance and innocence when she accepted her role. But the one that I-feminists are accepting their role, not ready to blame anybody for her state or situation, but she does this with all her pride and self-worth intact in herself. So this is the difference. I must also reiterate that this feminism is only at this early stage now, though it started in the 1970s. Not much insistence is upon there. Like in the name of feminism, the blame culture is what still is going on. So somewhere the self-worth part, people have to work on. Perhaps in this century it is possible. Another major problem here is that men in these novels are majorly ignored, because after all the development that a female mind has undergone, all the modernity that she has accepted, man or the male mind seems to have remained the same. Male mind has never been directed upon for any development which the modern female mind would find as its equal. So he has remained the same, whereas she has, within quotation, perhaps progressed. But so somewhere we find that there is this lacuna, which perhaps would be much insisted, and in fact will be covered in this century's literature. Until now, we could not leave the past behind. In fact, the tendency with which we are again and again going back to the myths, as the earlier speaker was talking about, myths and epics, it only makes me wonder if there's going to be a lot of rereading of the old mythologies and epics in the 21st century. Why are we even doing it? Is that because we are lacking something new, or is it because we are not entirely new at any phase? Perhaps we always are going back to the root and we find something new there and then we come back. Ahmed Khalid Tawfiq, the Egyptian writer, himself having a medical background, who passed away in 2018, who was writing till the last moments of his life, has incorporated much of Egyptian mythologies in his works. He's quite a famous writer among the Egyptians. The reason of his fame itself shows that people have accepted the kind of a culture that he has portrayed in his book as to be theirs. Now, he majorly, he talks about, he goes back to the past, and the manner he has written, the meta aspects of nature, physics, life itself, other ways he has presented in his writing. And his popularity amidst the Arabs and Egyptians prove that he was close to their culture, and that Egyptians have never tried to negate metaphysics after the spread of science as the natural lifestyle documented by him in the major works. In his work, Utopia, he also talks about how Europeans have tried to inject their culture into them and trying to take away all the beautiful aspects of Egyptian thoughts and lifestyles. Tawfiq's characters would remain one of characters that O.V. Vijayan had created in his legend of Kashikatta Itihasam, where Ravi, who after all the masters in physics and scholarship at USA to pursue his PhD, he believed that maybe the spider that he had crushed under his slipper or the lizard on the wall was an incarnation of his dead father. But the point here is nobody tries to take that innocence away from him. In fact, his innocence only takes him closer to the natural world. When a snake bites him and he was about to die, he only shows care for the snake by talking to it like he was talking to a child and asking the snake to go away before someone comes and finds out that he was bitten by him. But Tawfiq's characters are manipulated by the Europeans to leave their cultural patterns of thinking and embrace the modernity. This modernity has drug culture and all other forbidden, illegal, and illicit acts of the Egyptian cultures are there injected in them. Now, what kind of a power system are we arriving at here? Another aspect which is ignored so far was the understanding that every era has its own culture, which almost gets faded and extinct after a few centuries. And in that case, to try and evaluate a culture based on the changed mindset of the current era is ignorance. The reason why Kannagi was silent when Kovalan spent his days and nights at the threshold of Madhavi was a question which is often raised by most of the feminists of the past century, which we find even now some of them are questioning that. Now, what is to be understood here is that Madhavi had a very different kind of a culture back then. She belonged to a very different culture. She was considered belonging to a greater clan, comparing it with that of Kannagi's. This was the kind of pride that Madhavi's clan enjoyed back then. And this could be understood when Sitali Satana describes the agony of Chitrapati, the mother of Madhavi. Now, Chitrapati is one not much looked into a character, but if we look at the dialogues that she shares, we will understand that she actually leading us to realize that she is an individual who had a very different outlook about chaste women. According to Chitrapati, they belong to a higher clan, and Kannagi is of a lesser being who leads a chaste life. Now, the whole idea will topple the very culture that we so strongly believe in. Understanding this character of Chitrapati leads one to realize that she's totally an individual who believes in a very different sense of a culture. Now, this was a culture which existed back then and is not the one which is appreciated now by the majority. But wouldn't all these rereading, when we go back and then we reread and we try and understand the culture which existed in the past, because that is majorly is being done in this century by most writers, what is likely to happen? I was wondering if wouldn't that also become another accepted system and pave way for a culture which is still popular in countries like Thailand? The future years of the century might answer that. We cannot at any point forget that everything is linked to everything else. All the current theories that are predominantly are applied today will have connections with Aristotle, T.S. Eliot, and Wordsworth, and so on. So to say that this century is going to be a different one is not entirely right either. If we look back, we can find the serious epic culture got replaced by mock epic. Emotions were ridiculed, happiness were marked by boisterous laughter, and this we can find in Alexander Pope, who belonged to the early 18th century, and Sheridan, who belonged to the later part of the same century. Now, one other observation is that in the past few years, mockery is one culture that has picked up its pace. Somewhere we have got it from 18th century, I guess. Innumerable memes. Only if the society is extremely intelligent and if it has reached its danger stage of I do not care, this kind of laughter is even possible, according to me. The social researchers find it tough today to understand the reason behind much of people wandering in the streets to hoard food in this pandemic situation with no precautions, with almost no fear on face for the looming death. The reason is simple. The jokes on COVID is much into our head and is injected into us every minute through social media that we just don't find it affecting us at all. This state of mind is explained by Soren Kierkegaard. In his Either Or, Part 1, he talks about it something like this. A fire broke out backstage in a theater. The clown came out to warn the public. Fire broke out in the backstage in the theater. The clown came out to warn the public. They thought it was a joke and applauded. He repeated it. The acclaim was even greater. I think that's just how the world will come to an end, to general applause from wits who believe it's a joke. Now, I couldn't help myself connecting Soren Kierkegaard's this particular statement with that of our current situation. And we cannot be emotionally upset for a long time is one serious mindset that we are possessing now. And together we are not interested in proving every serious point of the other. And we tend to make it laughable. We tend to prove our superiority through laughing the other's serious point. So this is another mindset which we find now. So this is also is likely to get reflected, and perhaps a structure-wise or the emotion-wise kind of a change is likely to take place in this era based on this mindset which we have developed. But are jokes that bad is another question which one is likely to ask. Why should it hurt people to the extent that they despise this form so much? And how is it even relevant to our novels? As I stated before, everything is interconnected and no age or era can be viewed in isolation. How was joke viewed in the last century? And how is it now is an example for the connectedness that we ought to view in the novels that ought to come. Milan Kundera's first novel, The Joke, published in 1967. This is in the second half of the 20th century. It talks about how one dig, a sarcastic remark, a joke made by the protagonist actually gets him kicked out of the university, and how this one joke washes away his entire life destiny is the whole plot of the novel. In the novel, the protagonist was smart and talented. He was occasionally was he ran into trouble in school for being an independent thinker. Now, which was not much encouraged by the party members. When his girlfriend goes away to a special training camp run by the party, she writes a letter to him to tell him how wonderful time she was having there, and how she was embracing the doctrine of the party. He writes a postcard back, including a sarcastic joke that could be interpreted as being against the party. She doesn't write him again while she is there, save for a brief summary of her activities. He soon learns that party officials got hold of his postcard and considered it disloyal. They eject him from the party and kick him out of the university, essentially destroying his entire life's trajectory within minutes. He was sent to the mine to work there to make him understand the labor and the pain and all that, so that he realizes the value of the party. I feel that this situation now is not much different. The only difference is that almost all of us are laughing today, and we are not writing any postcard anymore. But then we have our tweeting system, which is governed by our WhatsApp group admins. Have to be cautious always, otherwise they can even get arrested for one passing joke by a member. Now, where are we then? So, if in 1960s, the joke was published, the content of it it would have seemed different, but the situation is the same even today. So, where is the progression? Are we really going to be any different in this century? To understand the culture, we need to understand how ideologies have affected the societies and how they are accentuated in creating new culture through literature and through popular media. As Louis Althusser defines it, ideology is a portrayal of individuals' imagined relationship to their genuine condition of existence. Societies can be examined with a multitude of angles, from a multitude of angles. However, when it comes to the effects of ideology on society, all societies are alike. The nature of the ideology controlling the person's society determines the person's style and way the way he is going to be happy in his life, or the way he is going to experience misery, struggle, or even suicidal tendencies. So what exactly is happening in his society makes him believe in all these things or take a decision or call on that. Now, this being the case, as stated by Marxist critic Louis Althusser and postmodernist Ronald Barthes, ideologies are tightly linked to the ruling group because it is the real controller of society rather than political parties. Now, as in the previous session, the question was raised about the kind of re-telecast which is taking place now. The writings under consideration in this study reflect the recreations of civilization as a result of a new ideology seizing power. So it's all about power most of the time when it comes to culture. According to the law of jungle, ideologies compete for life, with the strongest ideology emerging as the dominating ideology and eradicating all other competing ideologies. If you replace the word ideology with culture here, you will find everything falling in its place. I'm using the word ideology here because any culture has its own belief system, and that belief system is this ideology. And which ideology is to govern, or which is to have the majority, becomes the system here. As a result, the human being whose ideology is controlled by the law of the jungle is affected by the law of the jungle. According to Terry Eagleton, an ideology not only injects its own views, but it also degenerates ideas which might challenge it, obscuring social reality. The true guardians of the ideology are those in positions of power, who exclude all other competing forms of thought. There is a direct link between governing ideologies and literature. Literature is one of the ideology's weapons of victory. Literature has always been the golden lips that have kept the power structure in place. The subversive quality of literature, on the other hand, does not conform to the wishes of those in positions of authority. If we look at what kind of a literature were there listed in the international competitions, that also gives us some idea about it. Then the question of if literature is only showing what is there in the society, then why is it getting this harsh rejection sometimes? The answer to this again is that this rejection is in a way is only strengthening the foundation of the ideology that the book must be holding on to. It might seem is jolting, but in the long run, the new generation would love to embrace the same as well. So sometimes the harsh denial also it fires back. What degeneration or upliftment the society is to face after accepting the rejected one is something which only after a few decades can one understand. And till then, we can only have we can just see what is happening around. Metafiction is another structure which, according to me, narrative method, which according to me is getting into popularity. Now you find that it might become a dominant style for most of the writing. Soon we will be bidding goodbye to the stream of consciousness totally. We might not find that at all, because everything will be consciously jotted down here, because you want to assert yourself in such a manner that you don't want the consciousness to speak, but then your conscious mind alone will have to write everything. So that's one idea. So you directly address the reader. A story within a story will be there. A story about someone reading or writing a book you will come across, and characters that are aware that they are taking part in the story, to the extent that even the reader or the viewer will be absorbed into the whole series. The Black Mirror is one example where, with a normal remote control of a television, you can participate in the series by saying yes or no for the choices made by the character in the film. The desire to take part in everything that doesn't even concern us will be satisfied there. So this kind of a the innate desire to be part of everything is always there, and something which doesn't concern is the place where mostly we express that, and that is satisfied by these creators. Now this satisfaction has given human beings always what they have catered for. This is one new development of the century, when we do not even care about the bloodshed of the fellow human beings in the neighboring nation. Our desire to participate in the virtual life of that imaginary character is so satisfying. Now that's the irony which we will have to live along with. This technique will be at its best by the end of this century, according to me. Every fiction will have all its pros and cons present to us to decide upon. Every one of us will have several versions of the same to hold on to. My end to a story will be different from yours. I won't be even discussing it with you, for I'm satisfied with my virtual world. So why would I even discuss you? So you won't even know what is the end that I hold with me. You'll be made to lead an imaginary life with no interest in reality, and none will have to fear your ideology, and they can manipulate theirs into yours very easily, because at the end, the choice that is given to you is determined again by somebody else. So you might think that the choice is yours, but is it yours again becomes a question. That is likely to happen in this century. Ideology, according to social theorists, is the system of myths, ideas, and beliefs created by larger social forces which we believe in unconsciously. This means that we believe in this set of beliefs since we are born. We are injected that constantly. It travels in us unconsciously. We believe in the ideas of the society we live in, although we do not feel that we believe in them. When this ideology of society is part and parcel of our life, we lose the ability to see clearly. And thus we are unable to see the beliefs that we believe in. The other, in the previous session, ma'am had question of like, who is to, how is that ours is always the best? The reason is we don't even know what we are believing in. And at this point, the ideology is internalized in our social world and it becomes our natural life. Zizek argues that the key for the ideology to work is that it must be hidden and must not be clearly be given to any human. He should never know what it is, and only then he will be holding on to it. So, to understand what culture we have, we have embraced for self, can be understood only by viewing it from a distance. So, the other is able to understand our culture better more than the one who is practicing it. Romanticism paved way for the intellectual movement, which was characterized by heightened interest in nature, which we have today. That is ecology. A lot we talk, but somewhere it has also got its roots in the past. That is Romanticism. The individual's expressions of emotion, imagination, departure from the attitudes and forms of classicism, and rebellion against established social rules and conventions were marked as modernism. One more example I would like to give here. On 3rd January 1889, that is 19th century, Nietzsche spotted a coach driver beating his horse. And he rushed to the horse, hugged it tight, cried, saying he could do nothing to help him. Nietzsche immediately collapsed there after saying this and was taken back to his apartment, but he had collapsed mentally, so he remained mentally sick for years after that. In 2003, so which is the 20th century, James Coetzee in his novel Elizabeth Costello makes an analogy between murdered Jews and slaughtered cattle. Many find it beyond understanding. They think that Nobel laureates sometimes write beyond ordinary mind's grasp. They talk for animals that are stupid. The contemporary mind thinks Nietzsche's feeling for animals trivial, and Coetzee's theme in not decipherable at all. Yet we call ourselves modern. Whether we should be proud of these differences or be embarrassed by them is again a debatable question. Some of the questions that we are likely to have in our mind as we read the literature, which will be written in this era, would be these. Are we really modern? Are we modern enough to know what our modern thinking is? Do we know what our weakness is? Are we modern human beings human enough? And what kind of a writing which will be taking place in this era? What new moral code? What will be imposed upon? And what will be the tone of manipulation? Who will be considered as a great thinker in this era? Whose culture will be accepted as the ideal one? Here I'm reminded of this Taipei modern toilet diner which we have in Taiwan. It is considered as an epitome of modernity, where we come across only the toilet accessories as the seating arrangement. Even the food might seem like that, and anybody who belongs to our generation would not be happy there. But then it's quite famous among the younger generation. Now, how are these going to make any sense to us, or how is it going to make sense in this particular era? It also reminds of Milan Kundera's kitsch. When I think of this modern toilet diner, I'm not able to help myself thinking about kitsch, because this diner, as I told you, has great relevance to the modern culture which deconstructs all these set notions, because everything that is used there might seem like a toilet, but those are all brand new, made, created only for that. They are not used in any other sense, but still we find it grotesque. So this new modern culture in which youngsters call each other by bad words out of love. Now, it seems like all that which was considered as grotesque is they have overcome all that. Are they above all human hurts, or is it an effort to deviate from kitsch? Milan Kundera, in his Unbearable Lightness of Being, talks about the concept of kitsch. Kitsch is a German word that's been adopted by a number of other languages, including English. It refers primarily to the art that is overly sentimental or melodramatic, and so refers to aesthetics. What is interesting is the way Kundera uses the concept in his novel, not to talk about art, but to talk about political ideology uh, and about life. Like, the politicians going kissing older women or hugging a child. Now, those are all the aspects which come here. And Kundera asserts that kitsch is an aesthetic ideal in which shit is denied and everyone acts as though it did not exist. Like, nobody talks about it, nobody thinks about it, nobody can think about it, God falling ill or anything like that, because this cannot be considered as aesthetic. So these aspects he has spoken here. Kundera moves on to politics, saying that kitsch is the aesthetic ideal of all politicians and all political parties and movements. The desire to turn away from shit informs all aspects of our lives. And he also puts it as kitsch is an internal part of human condition. Now, after considering all that, the question that we have in our mind now is, after 20 years, when most of us would be most of us will be above 60 years of age, this generation which believes in type A toilet dineries, are the one who will be occupying most of the places. Are they going to be very different human beings who are going to think totally different from us? And is there going to be any depth in those thinking also is there? Or is it going to be the idealists, the best kind of a thinkers are we going to get from them? Now, these are several questions which keeps nagging us as we go on. I would conclude here with the understanding of that human mind and the writing of this century is going to shape each other with no denial for anything new and with much understanding of the past. This century, again, like all other previous centuries, is going to perceive its own right and wrongs. The new phase of war, the new idea of death drive, the new methods of communication may change our way of life, but the ethics, politics, and persuasion methods still may remain the same, is the understanding derived so far from the cultural representativity 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It was indeed a very insightful presentation. And we have gained a lot of important points, which will enable us to do our research in a very fruitful manner.
Thank you, sir.
Now, owing to paucity of time, I just request, this is my request, only one question, okay, from the participants or from the members of the Department of English. Just one question, okay, and I've been asked to make this request. Dr. Anwar can step in, or any participants. Please feel free. Okay, so no one is ready. So I think let me ask a question to Dr. Shanthichitra. Naseeb sir, you want to? Okay, Naseeb sir, you can carry.
Yes, yes, Doctor ma'am. I just want to
yes, please go ahead.
About your ideas. What this political correctness in the present scenario, where almost all the continents, political upheavals and changes are happening, and is the main target, one of the main targets is cultural changes. So according to your perspective, where this will lead to? Thank you.
Sir, it is something which is not new. It's been happening for centuries. I would want it to stop at some point of time. So if something has been continuously been happening, like somebody comes to power and then tries to suppress the other, and the other comes to the power and the suppression goes on like that. I always take example in life of the previous when Obama came to power, nothing happened of no, since he was in power, he could have exerted, like, at least even if it had happened, it was in a very minimal sense. In fact, he became a very accommodative kind of a leader. Now somewhere I find that Martin Luther King was able to lead his people in the right sense. He right from his first speech was able to make people realize that the whatever he's talking is not for his particular group, or it's not for one particular ethnicity. It is for all human beings. So any kind of such oppression should not take place at any point of time. Is the idea that he has sent. I mean, he could make that view understood by his people, and that's why perhaps the accommodative sense, the nature is something which could find in them. Now, if we can develop that kind of a mindset in every leader who is who's all embracing and who is not trying to inject his power into the other, or tries to oppress the other just because he was oppressed in the past, or anything like that. Like we are so naive today that we are so I don't want to use the word, but then we are so idiotic that we keep talking about history, and then we try and I mean, all the violence that is taking place today, it is getting justified through those manners. Now, we cannot call ourselves educated. We cannot call ourselves even civilized if we go on in that manner. And this is what I would like to give as a solution. Like, somewhere we have to stop. If we don't stop, then this will go on. Like, one culture will get erased off from the planet, and another might emerge, and somewhere again something might come back again. No, that's not the way. Everything will have to coexist. That makes us beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Once again,
Thank you.
we would like to thank you, and really proud to have you for this session. Thank you, one and all. And over to Shafiq Pasha. Shafiq?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Wesley sir, and thank you, Nazib sir.